You ever notice how copper pipe is the only thing in the shop that looks like jewelry before you use it, and then looks like a high-stakes science experiment the second you light the torch?
It's definitely the only time I see you acting like a surgeon. Most days you're swinging a 5-pound sledge, but suddenly, when the plumber's torch comes out, you're all about precision and delicate heat management.
Well, water is a vengeful element, Alex. It doesn't just wait for a mistake, it hunts for it. You can build a bookshelf that's a 16th of an inch out of square, and nobody's the wiser. But if your solder joint has one tiny pinhole that's thinner than a mosquito's wing, your drywall is going to look like a topographic map of the Everglades by morning.
Is that why we're doing a deep dive on sweating today? And by the way, who decided to call it sweating? It sounds like the pipe is having a fever.
It's a strange one. I've always figured it's because the flux bubbles out like beads of perspiration right before the solder sucks in. But whatever you call it, soldering, sweating, or just trying not to set the floor joists on fire, it's one of those skills that looks incredibly easy on a YouTube thumbnail and feels like dark magic the first time you try it in a crawl space.
Speaking of those thumbnails, I watched a few videos where these guys make it look like the solder just magically disappears into the joint. But then I see DIY forums where people have these silver stalactites hanging off their pipes. What's the disconnect?
Preparation. It's boring, it's tedious, and it's the only reason a joint holds. Most people want to get to the fire part too fast. They treat the copper like it's clean because it looks shiny, but copper is sneaky. It develops this invisible oxidation layer almost the second it hits the air. If you don't scrub that off until the metal looks like a fresh penny, the solder will just sit on the surface like water on a waxed car.
Okay, so step one isn't the torch, it's the sandpaper.
It's the workout. You need those fitting brushes, the ones that look like a bottle brush made of stiff wire, and some emery cloth. You scrub the outside of the pipe until it's bright, and you scrub the inside of the fitting until it's even brighter. If you aren't seeing your reflection in that copper, you aren't ready for heat.
I remember the first time I helped you with this. I thought you were being obsessive. You made me resand a joint because I touched the copper with my bare thumb after I'd cleaned it.
Skin oils are the enemy. Your fingers are basically grease dispensers. You touch that clean copper, and you might as well have painted it with non-stick spray. The solder won't take. It sounds picky, but skipping the prep is like trying to glue two pieces of wood together without taking the sawdust off first. It's a recipe for a 3 a.m. phone call to an emergency plumber.
So, after the great sanding of 2024, we get to the flux. I've seen people go absolutely wild with that stuff, like they're frosting a cupcake.
Yeah, the more is better philosophy. Total myth. Flux is an acid. Its job is to clean off any remaining oxidation as it heats up and to help the solder flow. But if you glob it on there like it's free, two things happen. One, it boils and spits hot acid at your face when you hit it with the flame. Two, the excess flux stays inside the pipe and eventually starts eating the copper from the inside out.
So a light coat is the Goldilocks zone?
Just a thin, even smear on the pipe and a tiny bit inside the fitting. You want it to look like the pipe has a bit of a sheen, not like it's wearing a winter coat. And then, this is the part most folks miss. You got to wipe off the excess that squeezes out when you push the pipe into the fitting. If you leave a big ring of flux on the outside, your solder is going to run all over the place instead of staying where it belongs.
All right, so we've cleaned it, we've fluxed it, and we've joined them. Now we get to the Tiger Special, the torch. I've seen you use those blue cans and the yellow ones. Does it actually matter, or is it just about which color matches your outfit?
Believe it or not, I don't coordinate my propane accessories. The blue cans are standard propane. They're fine for half-inch pipe in a warm room. The yellow cans are MAP gas or MAP Pro these days, and they burn much hotter. If you're working on 3/4-inch pipe or you're in a drafty basement, propane is like trying to boil a pot of water with a candle. It takes forever, and while you're waiting, you're heating up the whole pipe, which dries out your flux before it can do its job.
So heat it up fast and get out?
Precisely. You want to aim the tip of the inner blue flame right at the hub, the thickest part of the fitting where the pipe is tucked inside. Heat the fitting, not the pipe. The solder follows the heat.
This is where I always get nervous. How do you know when it's done? I feel like if I wait too long, I'll melt the whole house down. But if I go too early, the solder just clumps up and falls on the floor like a sad silver pebble.
It's all in the touch. You don't keep the torch on the joint while you apply the solder. That's a rookie move. You heat the fitting, then pull the flame back an inch or two and touch the solder to the opposite side of where the flame was. If the metal's ready, it'll drink that solder right in. It's like a sponge soaking up water. If the solder doesn't melt instantly, it's not cooked yet. put the heat back on for another 5 seconds, and try again.
And the gravity factor, I saw one of those Roger the Pipe Guy videos where he talks about vertical pipes. He mentioned something about the pro secret for vertical joints, so the solder doesn't just drip out.
Capillary action is the secret sauce. Most people think the solder is just falling into the joint, but it's actually being pulled in by surface tension. On a vertical pipe, if you're soldering upward, you have to be careful not to overheat it, or the solder gets too thin and runs out. You want to feed it into the top of the joint and let it wick down. If you see a little silver ring form all the way around the bottom of the fitting, you've won.
What about the 1-inch rule? I've heard you mutter that under your breath before.
Yeah, for half-inch pipe, you generally need about half an inch of solder. For 3/4, you need about 3/4 of an inch. I usually just bend a little L shape at the end of my solder wire to the length I need. Once that L has disappeared into the joint, I know I've filled the cavity. If you keep feeding it past that, you're just filling the inside of your water line with silver icicles that'll cause whistling noises or clogs later.
Okay, let's talk about the oh no moment. You've done the work, you turn the water back on, and drip, drip, drip. Is there a way to save it, or do you have to cut the whole thing out and start over?
This is where the real tuition happens. You cannot, and I mean cannot, just throw more heat and solder at a leaking joint. It never works. The water inside the pipe turns to steam, creates pressure, and blows a hole right through your new solder.
So you have to drain the whole system again?
Every drop. If there's even a thimble full of water sitting near that joint, it'll act like a heat sink. You'll be there with your torch for 20 minutes and the pipe won't get hot enough to melt a chocolate bar. You have to get the pipe bone dry. Sometimes I use a shop vac to suck the water out, or I'll shove a piece of white bread up the pipe to block the trickles.
Wait, did you just say white bread? Like Wonder Bread?
It's an old school trick. You roll up a ball of the soft middle of a piece of bread and jam it in there. It stops the drips long enough for you to solder the joint. Then, when you turn the water back on, the bread dissolves and flushes out through the faucet. Just make sure you take the aerator off the sink first, or you're going to be cleaning soggy crust out of your tap for a week.
That is the most Tiger thing I've ever heard. Using a sandwich to fix a plumbing leak. But seriously, once it's dry, you have to take it apart, right?
You have to. You heat it up, pull the joint apart with pliers, wipe the old solder off while it's still liquid, and then re-sand everything. You can't just reflow old contaminated solder. It's a pain, but it's the only way to be sure. It's why you learn to be obsessive about cleaning it the first time.
I noticed you always have a wet rag nearby, too. Is that just for fires, or is there a technical reason?
Both. Obviously, you don't want to be the guy who burns his house down over a leaky faucet. But wiping the joint with a damp rag right after the solder solidifies does two things. It cleans off the leftover acid flux, which will turn your pipe green and crusty over time, and it gives the joint that nice professional quench look. Just don't do it while the solder is still liquid, or you'll cold shock the joint and it'll crack.
It's interesting. For something that seems so permanent, welding metal with fire, it's really a game of tiny, fussy details. The bread, the thumbprints, the L-bend in the wire.
That's the maker's life, Alex. The big tools get the glory, but the success is in the stuff nobody sees once the walls are closed up. There's a real satisfaction in turning that main valve back on, hearing the pipes groan as they fill up, and seeing nothing, just dry copper. It's a quiet kind of victory.
Usually followed by you going to get a sandwich.
Well, I already have the bread out, don't I? Might as well not let it go to waste.
Fair enough. So, if you're listening and you're about to tackle your first copper project, what's the one thing you want them to keep in mind?
Don't rush the prep. If you feel like you've sanded it enough, sand it for another 30 seconds. The fire is the easiest part of the job. The sandpaper is the most important. If the metal is bright and the pipe is dry, the physics will do the rest of the work for you. And for heaven's sake, keep a fire extinguisher nearby. Excellence is great, but not having to call the fire department is better.
Sage advice as always. Next time, can we talk about why anyone would ever choose PEX over copper? Or is that too controversial for the Tiger Den?
Oh, we'll get into the plastic versus metal wars soon enough. But for today, let's just enjoy the shine of a well-sweated elbow.
Works for me. See you in the shop, Tiger.
Stay sharp, Alex.